Hi, this is David at Mash IT. Now, having recently reviewed the Thinkpad X1 Nano, I've had an awful lot of comments regarding the MacBook Pro and MacBook Air M1 Apple Silicon Edition. We've had so many comments between the two of these laptops with how the MacBook would absolutely destroy the ThinkPad that we thought, well, let's put a video, put the two together and see how they perform. So we're going to do just that today. There's going to be timestamps down below because it's going to be quite a long video to compare all the aspects of these two laptops. So if you want to, feel free to just jump ahead to the parts that you wish. And let's make a start between looking at these two. Now you can see them both side by side here. Try to put them side by side so that you can see the difference in the height just to start off. You can see these are both 13-inch, 16 by 10-inch laptops. So they are very similar in size. The X1 Nano is actually slightly taller than the MacBook Pro, but the MacBook Pro has a slightly bigger footprint. So let's take a look around both of these laptops and see what they both offer in comparison to each other. Now, straight away you can see they're both quite plain when they're closed. You've got just the embossed Apple logo on the MacBook Pro. On the ThinkPad X1 Nano, you have the little X1 logo, and the ThinkPad has the little red light that lights up to show you that it's in sleep mode. That's quite a nice little touch, and it's something I've always loved about the ThinkPads because you know that it's sleeping when that little red light's flashing. On the front of the laptops, both very plain. You've got a nice cutout for the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, whichever you're looking at. In comparison, the ThinkPad X1 has nothing, but you can still feel the lid quite easily. So there's a little, bit of a difference between the actual base and the lid, which makes it easy to lift up still. We will compare one hand opening in a little while. Now we're going to take a look at the left side and have a look at the ports. Now both these machines are particularly short on ports. A lot of the comments from the ThinkPad users are about how this isn't a proper ThinkPad because it doesn't have the regular ports. But you've got to bear in mind that this is an ultra slim, ultra light laptop, and it is competing for this sort of space with the Pros and the Airs and other Ultrabooks, not your typical ThinkPad T490s or bigger, chunkier machines with lots of ports. So you can see, obviously, this is the 2-port model because the other one is the Intel. So you've got 2 USB 4 ports on the Mac on this side, and that is it. On the X1 Nano, again, we've got 2 USB 4 ports, and we've also got a headset jack. Now we're going to spin it around. Now on the right side, the MacBook Pro, we've got a headset jack. That's it. On the X1 Nano, we've got the vent, so it pumps out the air on the right side. Now I did think this was going to be a problem because I've had others before that you get scorched hands by having this, but this doesn't run particularly hot. So this hasn't been an issue for me. It's only warm air coming out of here so far. And then just the other side of the vent, we've got the power button. And you can see again that's flashing because it's telling you that it's in sleep. This is another nice little touch. So you can look at the side or you can look at the top and you can see that the actual ThinkPad's in sleep. With regards to the Mac, you have to turn it on and see. Now if you look at the back of the actual laptops, you'll see it's just a nice slab of aluminium. For the Mac, it's nice and clean. It's just the hinge, which is a nice one-piece hinge. And on the X1, you can see obviously the 2 hinges here, and over in the middle you've got a SIM tray. Now this is something that's quite nice on the actual X1 Nano, is the fact that you can actually put an LTE card in here and actually have cellular on these, and this is one of the reasons that I actually decided to get this one in. I have actually got that card in this, which is why this model is quite expensive in comparison to some of the other X1 Nanos that you can buy out there. So now we've looked around the machines, let's see what they weigh. Firstly, we're going to look at the X1 Nano. So the X1 Nano is 950 grams or 2.15 pounds. That's incredibly light. It feels almost like you're holding an iPad when you're lifting this laptop around. You'd think it's going to be flimsy considering how light it is, but it's been remarkably solid during my everyday usage for the last week using this laptop. Now let's look at the MacBook Pro. And that's 1.37 kilograms or 3.03 pounds. So quite a big difference in the weight. You can really feel it. This feels quite hefty when you're lifting it. Whereas when you're picking up, as I say, the X1 Nano, you honestly, you pick it up and you think, well, there's something wrong with it, it's so light. But as I say, it's still very solid. It's just a very light machine to port around, which is quite nice. So you can see that both of these machines are very light still. So for carrying around for everyday use, let's have a look at what the power adapters are like. So here is the power adapter for the X1 Nano. You can see we've got a UK plug on the end of it, which plugs into the adapter. It's a 65 watt USB-C. It's quite nice in that it's particularly long because obviously you've got your one piece there for the plug, and then you've also got the piece for your to plug into your laptop with the USB-C. The actual brick part of it is really nice and small and compact, and you can just wrap the cables around. But I do find having the 2 cables on this does make it a bit of a mess, a bit of a bird's nest going on in your bag. And in comparison, we have the MacBook Pro 61-watt USB-C charger. This will plug straight into your wall socket. So you've obviously got less of a reach to your laptop, but it does mean that obviously it's a bit tidier when you're throwing this in your bag. So it's pros and cons to both. Now obviously you can take the head off and you can buy an adapter which will then plug it into a lead to your wall adapter. But again, Apple used to supply that for free, but Apple being Apple, you now have to buy that as a value add-on. Just compare the size of both of those. You can see that the Lenovo is actually a more compact charger. It's actually a better shape to throw in your bag as well. Right, so now that we've looked around the laptops, let's open them both up. They're both just currently sleeping. So we're going to do one hand lift and see if they can both easily lift up with just one finger. And then we're going to see how fast that they resume from sleep as well. Now I'm going to do the Mac first. I've always been impressed about A, how easy it is to open it, and B, how quickly it is to resume with this M1 system. So you can see it's instantaneous. It's almost like having a phone. You lift it up and it's on and it's there. And I'm going to do the same to the X1. So not quite as easy because it's very light. The actual base is lifting up there. But you can also see how quickly that resumed from sleep as well. This is one of the things apparently they've improved with the Tiger Lakes with this Evo platform, is that the resuming from sleep is much quicker, and it does feel pretty instant, although it doesn't feel as fast as this new M1 Mac. So now we're at the login stage. The options that we've got to log into these machines. With the Mac, you have an option of the fingerprint reader, and if you have an Apple Watch, you can log in with that as well, but obviously that's something you have to buy separately. So we're just going to log in with the fingerprint reader. One touch, you're in. It's very simple, it's very reliable, and I use it all the time, and it's been great. With regards to the Nano, you've got Windows Hello. Now I'm going to just angle that at my face rather than me standing in front of the camera. And there we go, it's logged me in. Now of the two, I have to be honest, I prefer the Windows Hello, because normally if I'm sitting in front of the laptop, I lift it up and it's logged me straight in. No hassle, no fuss, it's absolutely brilliant. Now with this X1 Nano, not only have you got the Windows Hello, but you do have a fingerprint reader as well, so you've got two options. So with regards to the actual logging in, with regards to logging in, I have to give it one up there to the X1 Nano, where having the two options and also the Windows Hello is a better way of logging in my personal opinion. Right, so let's start from the decks and work our way up and look at these machines. You can see straight away from looking at the machines that obviously the X1 Nano is slightly more compact. That also translates to the touchpads as well. This MacBook Pro M1 has a massive touchpad for the size laptop it is. You can see how dominating this touchpad is on the actual chassis of this laptop. But it is such an amazing touchpad. This has got to be the best touchpad of any brand of laptop. Apple's haptic feedback touchpad is just amazing. It feels like you've got a click anywhere you press on the touchpad. It's responsive. You can change the force of the click and it glides nicely and your gestures work every time. I mean, if you've never used a Mac before, this is probably one of the selling features of a Mac, the actual touchpad. They are absolutely brilliant. Now with regards to the Windows and the X1 Nano, we've got a much smaller touchpad. It's responsive, but this is obviously the diving board mechanism where you've got a hinge at the top, and as you press it, the actual trackpad clicks down. And what you'll find is the higher up you click, the less responsive it is, and you can't click right at the top. But as trackpads go, it's responsive. I wish it was a bit bigger. It is quite small. So obviously you've got a much bigger area to work with on the MacBook Pro, the Lenovo, the X1 Nano. You've got quite a small area, but it does glide nicely, so you can easily move from side to side on the laptop when you're using just the touchpad. Now, in regards to the materials on the decks, obviously this is a one-piece aluminium sort of milled deck. Everything's sort of pristine, perfect. It is obviously quite cold to the touch because it's aluminium, and it is quite sharp edges because it's aluminium. I've always liked, it's a classy looking design, but it's not the most comfortable. If you're typing and you rest your arms on top of the deck, you will certainly feel that on your wrists. It's something that I know annoys a lot of people. Now, the X1 Nano, on the other hand, is using a soft touch finish on the decks. It feels lovely when you put your hands on this because it's just a really nice tactile sort of feeling, a nice texture to it. Now the good part of that is it's always nice and warm, it's comfortable when you're resting your hands on it, you know, your wrists on it, it's not going to cut into you, it's nice and smooth. The downside of that is it does pick up finger oils, so it will start looking grubby when you start using it for a little while. You could be forever cleaning it. So, you know, choose your poison really. Personally, I much prefer this soft touch finish if it's something that you're using every day, and I'd rather clean it and have a more comfortable laptop. Now if we move up to the keyboards, where obviously the MacBook Pro absolutely dominates in the trackpad, the keyboard, I would say, is average to just above average. They've obviously changed it in this generation, and we've got the new Magic Keyboard. And it is a good keyboard. I've been typing on this a lot over the years, and I hated the butterfly keys. I was in the camp that absolutely hated it. Moving to this, if you're just using butterflies and move to this, it's a breath of fresh air. It's lovely to type on. But if we go over to the actual X1 Nano and you use this ThinkPad keyboard, it's in a different league. Now, a lot of die-hard ThinkPad users are moaning because they've taken the travel down to 1.35mm on this keyboard, but it's still a great keyboard. Now, if you're used to, you know, an older X1 Carbon or, you know, T series with a deep travel, about 1.8mm I think it was, then yes, this is a bit of a downgrade for you. But you've got to bear in mind it's a very compact Ultrabook with a very thin chassis that they had to make some sacrifices. 1.35mm is still a comfortable amount of travel when you're typing on this keyboard. And comparing the two, this keyboard is massively better than the MacBook. I like the actual shape of the keycaps, they're comfortable, it's tactile, it's just a great typing experience. And if I'm going to be typing a lot, I would pick up the ThinkPad every day of the week. Both keyboards are backlit. The backlighting is a lot better on the MacBook Pro because it can auto adjust, and you can adjust it in a lot of different stages. Whereas a ThinkPad, you've just got 2 levels of backlighting. Well, actually, you've got 3. You've got off, low, and high, and that's it. And you can see there's quite a lot of leakage around the keys. But do you know what? It works, and it lights the keys up, so what more can you say? Now, in the middle of the keyboard on the ThinkPad, we have the Think Point. There's a little nub here, and then that's what these buttons are for. So you can move around with your Think Point, and you can click these buttons. These are like dedicated mouse buttons for the actual Think Point. You can also use the touchpad and use those buttons as well, as if you wish. But this is something I've never really used, but it is nice that it is there. Now moving up to the top of the keyboard on the MacBook Pro, I've got to mention this. Obviously we've got the MacBook Pro here. This has the touch bar. This is like Marmite, you either love it or hate it. And I'm afraid I'm not in the love it camp. I can't find a good use for this at all, and I know some people do. I just can't. So personally, I prefer the MacBook Air in this M1 series to the MacBook Pro, but unfortunately I don't have it to hand. Gary's got it at the moment. I'm using the Pro. So it is what it is. Obviously with the touch bar, it's customizable. It's a little OLED screen, and you can change all of those characters, F keys, functions, whatever you want for the application you're in. So it does have some benefits. I would just rather have dedicated function keys, but it is there if you like that. Now on the ThinkPad, obviously, we've just got your standard multimedia function row keys there. Now if we're looking above, you can see we've got some speaker grills on the X1 Nano. There is nothing on the top on this one, but the speaker grills are down the side of the laptop here. With the Nano, they have massively improved the speakers over previous Lenovo ThinkPads that I've used, and we're going to do a quick test of the actual audio now. Right, so we've got our royalty-free music up on YouTube. I'm going to play one after the other, and I'll put my microphone in the middle of the 2 laptops. Now, both these laptops are set to 50%. So we're going to start with MacBook Pro, and we're going to move over to the X1 Nano. Here we go. That's the MacBook Pro. I'm going to put the volume up a little bit, so I'll put it up to about 70% on both MacBook Pro. The next one, Nano. So there we go. You can hear straight away that the X1 Nano is a lot louder than the MacBook Pro, and it actually sounds really good. I've been incredibly surprised with the actual speakers in this X1 Nano. Now I know this is the base MacBook Pro. I'm sure when they bring the 16-inch out and the hopefully a 14-inch out, those will have better speakers with this. And I do find that they're great speakers, but they're quite quiet. As I say, I've had the 16-inch MacBook Pro before this one, and that blew this away. So I'm hoping, obviously, the new 14-inch will improve the speakers. But of the two, I prefer the speakers on the X1 Nano, and I didn't think I'd be saying that. Okay, so now moving up to the screens. Now, although these are both 13-inch 16x10 laptops, the MacBook Pro is actually 13.3-inch, and it has a 2560 by 1600 resolution for this Retina display. Now the X1 Nano is actually only a 13-inch, so you can see it is very slightly smaller. There's not much in it, but you can just see it's a little bit smaller. And that has a resolution of 2160 by 1350, so a slightly lower resolution, but also a slightly smaller screen. Both of them are absolutely pin sharp and great from a standard viewing angle. I've been using, obviously, the Mac for quite a while now since this has been released, and I've had a good week using this X1 Nano now. And I have to be honest, I love them both. I love how bright the MacBook Pro gets. I love the glossy display. The images look great, they're sharp. Obviously, you can't see any pixels on it, and that's amazing. On the other hand, this is a matte screen on the X1 Nano. I love the fact that you get less glare on it. You can take it outside easier. It still gets bright, 450 nits, but it's not as bright as the MacBook Pro. But it is also equally crisp. You never see any pixels, and it's a lovely screen to actually work on day to day. So screen-wise, I'd say it's a bit of a tire. I love them both. They're both great screens. If I had to choose one or the other and was just choosing the screen, I would probably choose the X1 Nanos purely because it's matte. And if you're working outside or working in a bright room, that is definitely beneficial, having a matte screen for actual day-to-day work. Moving above the screens, webcams. Both very mediocre webcams, both very mediocre mics. Obviously, this MacBook Pro is the base model. It doesn't have the studio mics like the MacBook Pro 16 has, and the mics in this are okay. They're nothing special. Probably better than the X1 Nano's mics. Those are quite poor, I found. And the camera is also very poor in the X1 Nano. One lovely thing about the actual camera system on the X1 Nano is the Think shutter though, and that's just this little button up here to turn your webcam off. Now the MacBook Pro has a little light that comes on when your camera comes on, and that's quite handy. So you know that the camera's engaged. But with this one, if you lock this off, you have a little red dot over the actual camera area, and you can see that nobody can then use that camera. So you know straight away, no one's going to actually log on and take over your camera. Also, this is very easy to use. Now with regards to the internals on both of these machines, Apple makes it very easy. If you buy the MacBook Pro, you can either choose the M1 MacBook Pro or the Intel MacBook Pro of the 13-inch variety, and that's it. So you can then configure the RAM or the SSD, which does obviously bump the cost up significantly. But once you've bought the laptop, nothing is upgradable on it. So you have to make sure you buy the specs you want when you buy this machine. Otherwise, you'll obviously be plugging in external hard drives and the like to keep yourself going. On the X1 Nano, now we have got a very expensive top-end model here. You don't have to spend this much. We spent £2,000 on this model. That was what was available in the UK when we bought it. There are more appearing now. But with this model, you can either get the i5, an i7, 8GB of RAM, 16GB of RAM, and you've also got an M.2 SSD in here, which is upgradable. Now that's quite nice, because obviously you can buy it then with the cheapest 256GB, 128GB that they offer, and then pop in a terabyte yourself. Now it's only a 42mm SSD, so you have to be aware of that, but it's still much cheaper to buy that and install that yourself than it is to actually have them do it for you. Also, I have created a video of the internals and how easy it is to get inside this machine, so that'll be in the description down below if you do want to see that. Also on the ThinkPad X1 Nano, we have the WAN card slot. Now I have this populated as well, and because I've got an LTE card I wanted to use, so that's nice that you have that option. It's an expensive option, but it's a nice option with this machine, which you don't have on the Macs. That's something I wish Apple would actually provide an option for. So now that we talked about the internals, I've just, in case you haven't seen the review, this is the i7 model that I've bought with 16GB of RAM and a 512 SSD. This MacBook Pro is 8GB of RAM and a 512 SSD. So obviously this does have more RAM, but the Mac is more efficient with RAM usage on these new Apple Silicon M1, so it's still quite comparable. Okay, so we're going to briefly look at the performance section of these two laptops. We know that the Intel M1 is going to win, that's pretty much a foregone conclusion, but we're going to have a quick look at how much and what sort of wattage it's going to be pulling whilst it's doing these tests. So Mac on the left, X1 on the right, and you can see we've got 2 watt meters behind Obviously the left-hand one is for the Mac, the right-hand one is for the X1 Nano. I'm going to start, we're going to run Cinebench R23, which is a 10-minute benchmark test for the CPU. This really hammers the CPU for this 10 minutes. So this will give us a good indication of throttling and performance. Now we're also going to take a look at the wattage as well. Now unfortunately, this Mac is just topping up, so we're not as low as we should be. So we're at 16 watts. It's normally about 8 or 9 watts. But you know, for the sake of it, I'm not going to wait another half an hour to run this test. We're going to just make a start. So I'm going to do the CPU multi-core on both of these, which does take 10 minutes. So here we go. And we're off. Now I just want to point out as well that the wattage was on idle lower on the X1 Nano because the battery pretty much finished. Now straight away, with this firing up, we're now taking 53 watts on the X1 Nano, whereas the Mac was about 16 watts because it hadn't quite finished the topping up the battery, and we're now at 38 watts. So we can see straight away there's 16 watts difference between these two on full load, and this is running faster. So performance per watt is incredible on these M1 MacBook Pros. Okay, so we're coming up to a minute into this Cinebench. The fans are just starting to spin up on the Nano. It's still obviously maintaining about 50 watts currently on the Nano and about 38, 39 watts on the MacBook Pro, so it's still using less. The MacBook Pro is still absolutely silent. The fans aren't even spinning up yet. There's also absolutely no heat on the keyboards. There's a little bit of warmth on the Nano keyboard, but it's still comfortable to use. And as I say, the fans, although they are spinning up, they're really, really quiet. You hardly even notice it. And you can see now that we've dropped our turbo on the X1 Nano. We're down to now 47 watts. So I'll just open up Task Manager. Yeah, you can see we've dropped down to 3.3 gigahertz now on the i7 Tiger Lake processor in here. So it has started dropping its turbo down. It's 3.6 gigahertz on all cores. So we're a minute and a half in now, and the fans are spinning up a little bit louder on the Nano. Still no fan noise on the Mac. But this is still very quiet, only just audible. So after about 3 minutes, the X1 Nano has dropped down to about 3 gigahertz on all cores, so again it's throttled a little bit more. The fans are still spinning, but it's certainly not loud. I'd say it's about 35 decibels tops, hardly noticeable. The Mac I think has just started to spin up with fans, but again it's drowned out by the Nano, and the Nano is quiet. And if we look at the watt meters now as well, you can see we're actually drawing both of them about the same wattage, about 39 watts each. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the test. You can see we've dropped down to 33 watts on the Nano now, so it's throttled a little bit more. We're running at 2.6 gigahertz. It's only just at the end of the test done that. So you can see that obviously it's very quiet. It's still running pretty cool, but it is throttling the CPU to do that. So long term, obviously you're going to get more throttling on the Nano, and this doesn't throttle at all. Now the M1 Mac has actually finished. We've got a multi-score of 7,758, which is a phenomenal score. And the Nano is still going. And just want to, whilst we're waiting for this to finish, point out that this is still cool as a cucumber, which is one of the things I love. And the fans, that was inaudible the whole time for this test against the X1 Nano. And the X1 Nano is quiet on load for a Windows laptop, don't get me wrong. We deal with a lot of gaming laptops or content creation laptops, and they're quite noisy when you're putting them through these tests. This isn't noisy, but it's still enough that I can't hear the Mac over it. So here we go, we're finishing off now on the X1 Nano. And the Nano has scored 4,831 points. Now again, for this, U-series chip, and it's a low-powered U-series chip as well, that's actually not a bad score with this Tiger Lake CPU. I'm not, unimpressed with that. It's just unfortunately, Apple have come out with the M1 Apple Silicon chip that's just destroying everything away, especially per watt. You can see this was pulling 38 watts all the way through. It destroys this X1 Nano, which was pulling, 48, 50 watts initially. So 7,758, 4,831. That's a 10-minute Cinebench R23 run. We also completed some Geekbench tests. So the Geekbench 5 CPU scores. MacBook Pro single core score of 1,736 in comparison to the Tiger Lake in the X1 Nano, which was 1,257. So a massive win to the Mac there. And the multi-core score on the M1 Mac is 7,646. And the X1 Nano is 4,505 points. So you see again, still a massive difference in performance between these two laptops. This is a ULV Intel chip, and it's Tiger Lake. And this is pretty good in comparison to other Intel chips, but in comparison to this new Apple Silicon, it is getting destroyed in a performance basis. Now if we move on to the OpenCL score for both of these chips, the MacBook Pro scored 18,955 with the Apple Silicon's 8-core GPU, and the Intel Tiger Lake Xe graphics scored 12,782. So again, a massive difference between these, especially per watt as well. This is just incredible performance from the Mac from a similar sort of appropriate ULV processor on both of these. I can't wait for the 60-inch version of the MacBook Pro to come out, because I think that is going to crush a lot of the actual desktop machines, because this low-powered, this is the entry-level M1 Mac, and it is scoring well above anything that currently Intel have got on the laptop market. Okay, so just to finish off the performance section of this video, we're going to do one of our usual videos rendered out through DaVinci Resolve. Now we've used DaVinci Resolve because A, Gary usually uses it to edit our videos, and B, it's cross-platform. So we've got the same version running, but obviously the Windows version and the Mac version. Now one thing I will say is it does run smoother on the Mac in day-to-day use. So using this on the M1 Mac is much more smooth than it is on the X1 Nano. That isn't because the X1 Nano cannot keep up with it. It's exactly the same as the desktop as well. It is just naturally better optimized on the Mac. But I would like to say that this is completely usable on both of these machines. I played around with it on the X1 Nano, and once everything's loaded in, or your project's loaded in, it was working perfectly. So let's render this out and see how long it takes on both machines. Set them both off at the same time. 3, 2, 1, go. So straight away you can see we're pulling 27 watts on the M1 Mac and 54 watts on the X1 Nano. But if you're looking at the actual jobs, this is absolutely flying through on the MacBook Pro. And it's quite slow on the X1 Nano. I don't think it's going to be a fair fight at all. So the MacBook Pro M1 has finished. 1 minute 44 seconds, flew through, no fan noise, completely cool. And you can see over on the right, the X1 Nano has probably done about nearly a third. The power consumption has dropped down to 36 watts now from about 50 odd. So you can see it's throttled back. So we're going to speed this up now, run way through to the end of this and see how long it takes. So finally, the X1 Nano is finished. Now coming near the end of that test, it throttled right down to about 1.8 gigahertz as well. Which is obviously, really going to hit performance. It completed the job in 9 minutes and 50 seconds on the X1 Nano. So that's 9 minutes and 50 seconds versus 1 minute and 44 seconds. I mean, it's not even comparable really. This was a 10-minute video that we've rendered as well, so this is quite a light video for us. And this is done in 1 minute 44, and that's nearly 10 minutes. It's just not even comparable at the moment. Apple have come out with this M1 processor, and for general heavy work, this just annihilates anything Intel has to offer. I think if we were pitting this X1 Nano against the Intel Mac, you'd be quite impressed with this X1 Nano because it is a good machine. But when you're putting it against this M1 Mac, you can see the advancements that Apple have made with this Apple Silicon. So a very impressive performance show there from the Apple Silicon M1. I would like to say, for the X1 Nano though, it doesn't get loud, it doesn't get hot. You can see it does throttle on the extended load, but it is, it's a nice machine to use. I think if you're not using this machine and hitting it 100%, so if you're just doing office tasks or other light use, this would be an absolutely lovely machine to use. But for video editing or 3D rendering or anything that's heavily utilising the CPU or the Intel Xe graphics cards, it's not the best, and the M1 just absolutely destroys it. So I think that'll do for the performance section. If you do have any requests or anything you want to know between these two, drop the comments in down below and I'll do my best to answer your questions. But now we're going to move on to battery life and conclusion. Okay, so now that we've done the performance section, what about battery life for these two machines? Now from our review, this X1 Nano, we streamed YouTube music at 50% brightness and 50% volume over Wi-Fi, and it lasted about 9.5 hours. So not a bad showing for a Windows laptop. But in comparison, this M1 MacBook Pro did the same test and it was over 19 hours we got out of this machine. You're talking well over double. And I've been using this machine a lot over the last 6-7 weeks that we've had it. And I rarely charge it. I feel like I'm charging it every other day rather than every single day. It's absolutely incredible the battery life you're getting at this machine. And I mean, I'm not talking about just listening to music, I'm talking about day-to-day work. Now obviously if you are video editing you're going to eat the battery up a little bit faster, but it still lasts incredibly well on this machine. If you're video editing on the go on the Lenovo, you're probably looking at about 3 hours tops. So battery life wise, it's again absolutely no contest. It is destroyed by the M1 Apple Silicon MacBook. So that takes us neatly on to the conclusion. Obviously, you're looking at both of these laptops. Price wise, the MacBook Pro would win straight away. This is only the base model with the 2 ports. It doesn't have any upgradability, but you're getting a good value product. I would personally probably buy the Air over the MacBook Pro because I don't think the Pro gives you enough extra features over the Air. But if you like the Pro, it's still a lot cheaper than a similarly priced ThinkPad X1 Nano. Now with the X1 Nano, you can configure it with an i5, a lower SSD, you can choose a WAN card or not a WAN card, so you can adjust it more to suit yourself, but it is still going to come in more than the MacBook Pro. So you've got to ask yourself, what are you really getting for the extra money with the Nano? Well, you're not getting battery life, you're not getting performance, you are getting a matte screen and you're getting a wonderful keyboard and you're getting really good speakers. You can upgrade your own SSD and it is a very nice svelte package. It's light, you can see it's got a very small screen bezel in comparison to the MacBook Pro. But in all honesty, I can't wholeheartedly recommend buying the X1 Nano over a Mac at the moment, unless of course you absolutely have to have Windows. That would be the only reason I'd say, yeah, alright, buy the X1 Nano. For everything else, the Mac just does it better. I think Intel have really got to up their game over the next year or so and bring out something that is going to compete, because at the moment they are getting absolutely destroyed on a per watt basis with this Mac. And we haven't even seen the 16-inch yet. I don't know what that's going to do to the industry. I do love this ThinkPad. I love the X1 Nano. I love ThinkPads in general. I love the keyboard. I think it's a lovely, light, usable package. I just can't justify the cost of it. And I think for the cost of it, you're much better off buying a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think. Pop your comments down below and I will do my best to get back to every one of you. Please also like and subscribe if you like our content and you'd like to see more, because we do regularly release videos and we'd like you to be notified of that. And lastly, thank you for watching.